بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ولي المؤمنين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد ولد آدم أجمعين وبعد. We'd like to welcome each and every single one of you and thank all of you for taking time out of your Friday afternoon and or evening to join us for the last installment of Beyond Ramadan. It's a well-known narration that gets narrated oftentimes in Ramadan that the Sahaba would, spend 6 months preparing for Ramadan and then 5 months after Ramadan making dua that Allah accepted. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our previous Ramadan, to accept from us all of the Ramadans that we fasted before it, to forgive and pardon us of any of the shortcomings in our fasting and our execution in that month of Ramadan, and that He grant us the reward of Laylatul Qadr in each and every single one of the Ramadans that He had blessed us to reach. Allahumma ameen. You see, even though Ramadan for us, and we're going to talk about this a little bit today, as Muslims, Ramadan for us is the highlight of the year. It's the peak of the year. But even though that's the case, how quickly do we forget it? And that's why this series was so important, and that's why, for me, even though last week we were not able to do the class, I just wanted to make sure that we talk about Ramadan beyond Ramadan. And you can see we took a systematic approach when it comes to this class. First, we talked about Shaitan Unchained, because the first thing that happens when Ramadan ends is the shayateen, they are unleashed, right? And so you can even see in the world that COVID in Ramadan was not like COVID outside of it. Things that were happening on a socio-political scale in the month of Ramadan is not like what's happening before it or after it. It's easy, as we discussed in that class, and I encourage all of you, if you missed it, to go back and watch the recording. It's easy for us to forget the impact that Shaitan has on our lives, and his ultimate goal, which is to take us all out. So we talked about what it means for Shaitan to be unchained, and how we can rechain him, even if it's not to the extent of Ramadan. Because the purpose of Ramadan is to give you the strength to keep him in check outside of Ramadan, right? And then we begin to talk about spiritual fitness, right? And the nature of Ramadan in and of itself, and we hear this often, is it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Many people, they burn themselves out in the first week of Ramadan, going to the masjid every single night. This year we were praying Tarawih at home, so staying up late. Oftentimes, especially going forward, many people will have exams and be in school during the month of Ramadan. People, they get burnt out. And so by the time we get midway through Ramadan, you see that the masajid are empty, that the attendance in the halaqat, they go down, right? But that spiritual fitness is not just for the month of Ramadan. We pace ourselves in Ramadan like a marathon to train ourselves on how to practice Islam in a marathon-like fashion, not to burn ourselves out in one area or to become lazy and unhealthy in other areas. And then the month of Ramadan is the month of the Quran, right? This is the time in which we recite Quran, as much as we can, trying to maximize our hasanat. And probably one of the first things that we neglect outside of the month of Ramadan is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we began to talk about the benefits of just having proximity to the book of Allah in the month of Ramadan, compared to how little proximity or closeness that we have with it outside of it, and how we can try to at least have some connection with the book of Allah outside of Ramadan, so that when next Ramadan comes with his aid and support, we will be able to maximize on Shaitan being chained. We will be able to really increase our spiritual fitness, and we can really and truly make it the month of the Quran and me, or the Quran and you, and the Quran and us. So this was the systematic approach that we tried to take. But qadarullah wa ma shafa'a, the last thing that we save, or the one that we save for last, which is fasting, is normally the first thing that we pick up in Ramadan, right? Because fasting is normally the first thing to go when Ramadan is over, right? In terms of worship, we drop the Quran, we don't recite it as much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma ameen. And then beyond that, like fasting, it's just a Ramadan only, right? So one of the things that is very interesting is Even as a non-Muslim, I always wondered, why do we call it fasting, right? I grew up in, you know, well, pretty unreligious, but later in life, I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist household, right? And there were people in the community who would do fasting, and and there were times that the church would encourage fasting. And I always thought the word fasting is kind of weird. Like, why the etymology of this word fasting? Is it because we're moving quickly? Is it because everything else slows down? The word fasting is actually an olden English word that was always used to refer to voluntary abstinence for a religious duty. So you're giving up something, you're letting something go, you're abstaining from something, right, for a religious reason. And in today's world, it's used for medical reasons. People use it to lose weight, you starve yourself, right? But the word sawm in Arabic, or plural, siyam, is actually a word that means abstention, right? It doesn't take on necessarily the same connotation within the lugha, within the language itself. It means to just abstain from something, right? Or to leave something off. But the technical term and phrase that we use it for is fasting, oftentimes in the month of Ramadan. Whenever you ask people, what are the 5 pillars of Islam? Oftentimes you will hear them say, Shahada, Salah, Zakah, Ramadan, and Hajj. But Ramadan is not the 4th pillar, or depending on the hadith, the 5th pillar. It's actually Siyam. Siyam in the month of Ramadan. That's the pillar. So Ramadan is the month, but the feature of it that makes it a pillar of Islam is to fast in it, right? And this is a part of the divine command that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the well-known verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 183, that it's written for you as it was written for those that came before you. It's prescribed for you, it's ordained for you, it's commanded of you like it was commanded for those who came before you, that you fast so that, inshallah ta'ala, you attain taqwa. One of the things that's interesting about this ayah, or about this command, is Allah does not mandate that you like fasting. Allah does not command that you love it. Allah only commands that you do it, right? And the byproduct of completing this task is, which is abstention, is supposed to be taqwa. But what we know is most people, they hate fasting. And what we know is most people do not attain taqwa from this month, right? So even though there is a goal of fasting, there is no requirement that you like it, which is very different than other pillars of Islam, or even other features of worship. For example, when people make Hajj, it's sometimes a life-changing experience for them. People love Hajj enough to where they try to go multiple times in a year, right? But more so than with fasting, and we're going to talk about Salah and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about it in the Quran, and what the Prophet said about it in the Hadith, more so with fasting than with other things, is you get this heightened awareness because of deprivation. You're depriving yourself of food and water, so you become a little bit more alert to things. You become a lot more sensitive. People they get hangry, they get tired, they need to sleep, and I get headaches. It just changes the way that you look at everything. But that level of awareness is relative. It is a relative amount of awareness relative to what is it that you're actually taking away from your fasting. There are perks to fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, what is that? وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, whoever has taqwa of Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a way out for them in every single one of their situations. In every single affair, Allah will make a way out for you if you have taqwa. This is in Surah Al-Talaq, chapter 65, at the end of verse 4. Whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah will make a way out for you in many different situations. How many of us have experienced, kiramat, miracles from fasting in the month of Ramadan and making dua in the month of Ramadan and seeing a lot of khair come to you in the month of Ramadan just because you're fasting? Because the byproduct of that fasting is taqwa, and whenever you have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah makes a way out for you in different situations. You see, taqwa in and of itself, that heightened awareness of abstention, it does have its own perks. It does have its own benefits. But whenever we talk about the ultimate benefit of fasting, the height of it is actually meant to be happiness without a reason, eudaimonia for lack of better phrasing, which is to be happy not for an intrinsic reason other than to be happy for the sake of happiness. When you're fasting for the sake of Allah, it's supposed to make you happy. It's supposed to give you a feeling that other things in life, it simply does not. But oftentimes we become so concerned with what we're leaving off that we lose sight of what it is that we're supposed to be gaining through the fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in, what is this, in Surah Al-Ankabut, chapter 29, verse 45, that in الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر, that Allah, fasting is something that is meant to keep you away from, that's supposed to prevent you from committing fawahish, which is illicit, amoral behavior, and munkar, evil deeds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with. So within the framework of this, we know that fasting has a direct impact on us. Whenever, like, not necessarily just because you fast, you won't do bad deeds. You won't engage in illicit, immoral behavior. Not necessarily that. In as much as we fast to reach the point to where we are actively leaving off fuhsh and we're actively leaving off munkar. This is the goal of salah. It has an objective. It's not that you just fast just to say that you're fasting. It's not that you pray just to say that you're praying. No, rather you fast so that you can attain taqwa, and you pray so that you can actually have a means of prevention from engaging in evil deeds that Allah is displeased with. The Prophet ﷺ said, this hadith is in that's in Sunan an-Nasa'i, narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh, and that's that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made, for, or rather from the things in this world, the coolness of his eyes is actually found in salah, meaning he finds great pleasure in praying to Allah. Can people say the same when it comes to fasting? Even, you know, some people, they make hajj and they hate it, but when they finish it, they feel a great sense of accomplishment. Even giving zakat, right? Psychologically, giving charity, it makes you happy. It has a positive impact on your mental well-being. Can we say the same about fasting? Does the starving yourself from sunrise to sunset have the same impact on you? Well, sometimes, well, most times, we would probably say no, right? But the reason why we highlight this is because there is purpose and utility in worship. Yeah, you do it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you to, and Allah told you to do it for reasons that He also made very, very clear to us. Whether it be doing it in the month of Ramadan or, you know, fasting outside of the month of Ramadan. For us, we want to be amongst the few when it comes to Siyam. The few, the proud, the Sa'imi, right? Not quite the Marines, but the few, the proud, the Sa'imi, the people who are fasting. What does it mean to be amongst a few? We want to be from those who are happy to be fasting because of the following reasons. We're fasting because we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. Even though it's hard, we know Allah is watching us, and that is enough for us to be pleased with the fact that we're doing it. Fasting is the most secretive thing that you could ever do in public. Fasting is the most secretive thing that you could ever do in public. If you see somebody, you can't tell if they're fasting or not. If I see you, I can tell if you're praying or not. If I see you, I can tell if you're in Hajj or not. If I see you or we're in a situation together, you can make it clear to me where your zakat is going and where my zakat is going. Zakat al-Fitr is something that we all witness with each other. Zakat al-Mal is something that people reach out to each other in order to help, you know, accomplish it. And inshallah ta'ala, whenever we do our Journeys of Faith series and talk about revert stories, you're going to know people who come to Islam, you find out about those things. But when you look for a person who's fasting outside of the month of Ramadan, you would never know it's true. And even though we as Muslims are aware that we're all fasting, a non-Muslim, when they see us, they can't tell that we're fasting. That's why you often get that line, even water, you're not even drinking water? They're amazed, right? Now, and as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Hadith Qudsi, فَإِنَّهُ لِي, without fail, the it here being siyam, is for me. This is what Allah said. When you know that Allah said fasting is just for me, after stating all of the actions of the children of Adam, it's for them. But fasting, that's for me. Salah, it's for you. It keeps you from doing the evil deeds. It keeps you away from stuff that will break your heart, that will take you down a dark path. That's for you. When you say the Shahada, you're freeing yourself from the hellfire by enslaving yourself to Allah and making it clear that this is the path that you're upon and the minhaj you will follow. When you give zakat, you're purifying your wealth. When you purify your wealth with even just 2.5% of what you saved in a year, or zakat al-fitr and taking care of other families, purifying your money is good for you, right? And when you make hajj, well, hajj is a much bigger discussion, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that siyam, فَإِنَّهُ لِي, that without fail, that is just for me. Or just in case someone ends up asking, well, what about hajj? Hajj is your ultimate dress rehearsal for the day of judgment. And whenever you go through that moment and you witness it for yourself and you see, like you practice it for the day of judgment while living, inshallah, I put some fire under you in order to prepare for whenever you are no longer amongst the living. Now, so to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that siyam is just for me is enough for me to do it. Allah is the one who rewards for it, so I'm gonna go out of my way to make sure that I do it. You see, the body, whenever you give the body something that it wants or that it desires, it finds pleasure in it. Because there are pleasure centers created in our mind and within our sensory organs that allows for us to enjoy the things that we give ourselves, right? Whether that be treats or, eating something delicious, some biryani, something like that, you feel good, right? But even though the stomach was created for food, even though the tongue was created for tasting, even though the ears were created for hearing, even though the eyes were created for seeing and the nose for smelling, the skin for touching and feeling, the heart and the mind were created for a sole purpose. The heart was created for the remembrance of Allah. The mind was created for reflecting over the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things are there for us to, use our bodies to worship Allah. So while we give our body the food and drink that it needs to be happy and to work well, without fail, what our hearts and our minds need is the remembrance of Allah, needs to attain taqwa. So whenever we put ourselves in a position where that is what we're getting through siyam, well, now you can find pleasure in abstaining from the thing that fuels your heart and fuels your mind to remember the one who created it. Fasting slowly, this is probably, out of all the weird topics and names that I've come up with for different talks, this is probably the weirdest name that I've ever dropped. And I've gotten more questions about this name. I've got more questions about this name of fasting slowly. What does that even mean? Well, the way that I came up with it, I didn't exactly know what it meant until I began to reflect over it, right? Whenever it comes to us fasting, we as people, we often do things much more slowly. We slow ourselves down. We say, hey, look, I'm fasting, oh, I don't want to go do this, I would, but I'm fasting. And do I have to fast and go to school, or can I break my fast if I have a test? Like, really, for us, fasting is not starvation. We're just delaying meals. We're literally just delaying meals until we eat. That's it, right? So there's a big difference between delaying meals and abstaining from the things that takes your heart away from the remembrance of Allah. Big difference. Because if we become so consumed with what it is that we're putting off, keep in mind, we don't fast for 24 hours. We only fast from sunrise to sunset. Oh, but it's so long. No. You're just delaying a meal. When you break your fast, it's as if you had never even, it's as if you weren't even fasting in the first place. Oh, I'm gonna eat so much food. And then you eat the date, you drink some water, you pray Maghrib, and you're not even as hungry as you thought that you would be or anticipate that you would be. And it goes on like that for 30 days. The same mental delusion of, oh, well, I need it. Same thing every single day, not finishing your plates, overeating, stuffing yourself, passing out. The same vicious cycle. Saum is not there for us to just delay our meals. The Siyam in the month of Ramadan is not there to make it the month of feasting. It is for most people. If you ask a Muslim, what's your favorite time of the year? They're probably not going to say the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. They're probably not going to say Muharram, the beginning of the year. They're probably not going to say anything other than the month of Ramadan, because Ramadan is unique in that way, that we use food as a means to bring us all together in times where we probably wouldn't see each other, which is fine. But really the reason why the month is so blessed and the food is so good and so on and so forth is because of the siyam that's in it. But even though fasting is a key feature of it, we're very slow to realize just how important that is, how important it is for us as people, and even how that abstention collectively, it unites us as an ummah. It brings us together. And who would think that the thing that unites an ummah, that finds an excuse to say ikhtilaf, difference of opinion over so many things, would unite upon staying away from food and drink? And that carryover from the blessedness of the month of Ramadan is really what we're lacking. We're lacking the ability to take the barakah of what we're amassing really in Ramadan and carry it over into Shawwal, carry it over into Dhul Qa'dah, into Dhul Hijjah, into Muharram, all the way back into Ramadan again. We have turned our fasting in Ramadan into like a quick burst of iman and of action. And because of that, we lose the barakah of it outside of the month of Ramadan. So then it becomes incumbent upon us to make sure, even though we're a month and a half removed from it now, can I still carry over some of the barakah of Ramadan? Absolutely. Because Allah gave you the tawfiq, because Allah gave you the success to witness the month of Ramadan in the first place, then that means that you have the capacity with this aid and support to actually carry it over into now. Ramadan and fasting, because fasting is something that effaces it just completely erases the sins off of the human being. It's like that, the ran that you get on your hearts, that the black dots and stuff. Ramadan becomes a ran removal service, where it's just purifying all of that dank, dark evilness off of your chest from all the sins you've amassed. Leading up to that point, it just purifies it. It just washes it right off. The key to doing that still exists with us now, even though we're not in the month of Ramadan. And the key to doing that is none other than fasting. So, alhamdulillah, we're going to come into our 45-minute range. I can do this. Inshallah, I can have a class that's 45 minutes. Make dua for me. I can do this. So when we start to talk about fasting, we need to take fasting slow. In the month of Ramadan, I've rationalized, and maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. I'm open to hearing what you think. But I feel like because we are so quick to fast for the first time, maybe since last Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan, that we kind of burn ourselves out on fasting for the entire year. So my first advice to you and pro tips on fasting beyond Ramadan is to take it slow when it comes to picking up fasting again. Alhamdulillah, we have within the spectrum is we're not people who just says everything is ikhtilaf. Within fiqh itself, that has a different connotation, but I digress. We're not people to say everything is a difference of opinion, but within the spectrum of rulings in Islam on nawafil fasting, on extra fasting, you have up until dhuhr to establish your niyyah, so long as you do not drink or eat before dhuhr. So sometimes for some of us, we don't even eat or drink until lunch. Some people, they sleep in, not adults who have full-time jobs and stuff, but some people, they sleep in until 11, 12, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, stuff in the afternoon, right? Make the intention to just complete the day fasting. Right now we're in the summer and the days are longer. This is very true, but why not make the intention? What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Well, what if I break my fast? It's a nafil fast. Take it slow. Maybe you make the intention, but you break around the Asr time. Maybe you make the intention, you break a couple of hours into dhuhr, but at least make the niyyah to do it. At least make the intention to do it. Why not? We have nothing to lose and everything to gain from it. Some people, they go super deep. I want to do the fast of Dawood alayhi salam. I want to fast one day on, one day off. Oh, you know what? This week I'm going to do Mondays and Thursdays. I'm going to do the 3 white days straight. The 3 white days are coming up. I'm going to do them straight in a row. but you're out of practice on it. Be willing to take it slow when it comes to fasting. But you know, fasting is not just leaving off food and drink, right? It's not just leaving off food and drink. Fasting of the tongue, fasting of the limbs, right? These are things as well that each and every single one of us should try to keep in mind. So even if you're not leaving off food and drink, at least fast with your tongue. Now, we're not going to say fasting with the tongue will get you the reward of fasting for food and drink and with your tongue, but we know that we can at least abstain from saying some things, listening to some stuff, watching some things, doing some things, right? And the greatest fasting is of the heart and mind, avoiding certain thoughts, avoiding certain feelings, micromanaging yourself, really. That's the whole purpose of fasting, is to micromanage yourself. If you have the mental and spiritual fortitude to not eat and drink, even though no one sees you except Allah, then surely you have the same mental fortitude necessary to not watch that thing, do this thing, say that thing, when you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still watching you. Find pleasure in the fact that you're leaving these things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. This is the key to keeping Ramadan alive in the heart outside of Ramadan, is to always be in a state of spiritual, emotional, mental fasting. And then to bring your body into the state where it is fasting to food and drink. It's the only difference. That's the barakah of Ramadan outside of Ramadan, beyond Ramadan. That's the barakah of it. Is that even though shaitan is unchained, you are equipped with the tools to rechain him. Even though we're outside of the CrossFit, nature of Ramadan, where it's just a complete mad dash in every way, shape, or fashion, you still have the same tools to be spiritually fit outside of it. And even though we know that Ramadan is the month of Quran, the same Quran is still sits not far from us, within hand's reach. We can still pick it up and we can still recite it. And more so than anything, even though we're not forced to fast from sunrise to sunset, we can at least fast with our hearts and minds, with the taqwa that we attain from that month. And we can take it a step further to fast with our bodies and bring our hearts and mind along for that ride throughout these upcoming days. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, additions, omissions, suggestions, or objections to anything that we shared today about fasting? You notice I didn't cover the fiqh of it. I didn't make it too long. Not going to make it too excessive, because we hear a lot about fasting. We hear more about fasting than probably anything else in Ramadan, right? The fiqh of fasting, what breaks your fast, and so on and so forth. So this is yeah. Is it sinful to break your fast before the time? Not for not for an extra fast. If you're making up a fast from Ramadan, then you have to complete it, even if it's outside of Ramadan, once you establish that intention. And you do not have until Dhuhr to make the niyyah for a Ramadan fast. You have to make it the day before. Is it sinful to break your fast? So for nafil fasting, no. If someone offers you food, you can break your fast or you can keep fasting. It's not sinful. Depending on the situation, it's preferred that you break your fast, but that's circumstantial. So for women, I hear that fasting is a debt you owe Allah, so make it up ASAP. Is that an accurate way to phrase it? No. Aisha radiallahu anha, she used to delay making up her fasting in Ramadan until the winter time, when the days were shorter, to make it easier on her. Is it a debt that you owe Allah? Well, yeah, of course. But to say you need to make it up ASAP, when our mother Aisha radiallahu anha would wait until the winter time in order to make up her fast so that the fasting would be easier on her, we can't say making it up faster is better. In fact, you should make it up when it's better for you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not put a restriction on that. And we do not see that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged the mothers of the believers to make it up faster. When Aisha radiallahu anha did this, if it was better for her to make it up quickly, then we would have found that in his guidance. Rather, we do encourage the brothers, if they miss it from travel or something like this, we encourage them, or like being sick, we encourage them to make it up as soon as possible. With our sisters, there's more factors to take into consideration. So we encourage them to make it up at their when it's most convenient and most easy on them. And more so than anything, we encourage them to keep it in mind, right? You don't get the reward of fasting the month of Ramadan until you complete your fast. So If you want the reward, then hasten to get it. If you got a game plan for it, I mean, take it very seriously. Look, Ahmad Aisha radiallahu anha is so shrewd and so intelligent that she's like, you know what, I'm gonna knock it out. Inshallah, Allah give me life till to the winter. I'm gonna just take care of all the days I need to make up. So function at a high level when it comes to pursuing your Jannah. Be a savage for your akhirah, just like how people in this dunya are savage for their dunya. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We ask Allah to make us from those who benefit from Ramadan, beyond Ramadan. We ask Allah to count us amongst the Sa'imeen and to give us a tawfiq in our siyam. We ask Allah Jalla Jalal to connect our hearts to His book, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make our remembrance of Him through His kalam, abundant in our day-to-day lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the spiritual fitness and the physical fitness and the mental fitness to be able to carry this deen. Allahumma ameen. And we ask Allah Jalla Jalal to help us chain shaitan and to chain our nufus and to chain our base desires. Allahumma ameen ya rabbil alameen. Ask Allah to bless each and every single one of you, to increase all of you in goodness in all of its forms, and to keep you safe from evil in all of its forms. Allahumma ameen ya rabbil alameen. أريدتم وجزيتم ووفيتم وكفيتم وعن الشيطان وحيتم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.